Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Dugogodišnji italijanski diplomata koji je služio u Washingtonu, Pragu, Parizu i Briselu. Od 2001. do 2007. godine bio je zamjenik generalnog sekretara NATO saveza i nadgledao je misiju ISAF u Afganistanu. Sada, kao direktor NATO fondacije, pomno prati rat u Ukrajini, evropsku sigurnost i budućnost transatlantskog saveza.
So, Ambassador, hello and welcome to the Al Jazeera Balkans channel, and thank you so much for taking time to speak to us. Now, let's talk about Ukraine. It's been more than 300 days since Russia invaded Ukraine. Do you believe that international public support, US included, for Ukraine has been waning over the last couple of months? And does this risk weakening political and military support for Kiev?
Well, this is a story which is an ongoing story. And I don't think that we are, at the last chapter of the story. What we all know, is that from the West, let's call it the West, there has been a strong support, surprisingly also unified support for Ukraine. And it continues to be that way. You may be surprised by that, but it continues to be that way. Even the new governments, including the government in Italy, are still going on the same policy as before, thinking that there is a Russian aggression which has to be stopped, and wishing to defend the independence and the integrity also of Ukraine. So now what is happening in the last few days, as you know very well, everybody knows, is that you start talking about peace. You had Zelensky speaking about a plan in 10 points to be put to the United Nations. And you think about, and you know that Mr. Putin is saying that he is in favor of peace, and the Ukrainians are those who don't want peace. Now, if you want me to continue on this comment, I think that this is not the right approach. Because it is clear that if you pose preconditions, there will never be the same preconditions. Because what the Ukrainians are saying, we want our full integrity, territorial integrity to be restored. What the Russians are saying, well, we have to take into account that we have a next 4 regions and we'll start from there. So if you continue like this, you don't go anywhere. So my modest opinion, being an old person and having been involved in security affairs for so many years, is that if you start a negotiation, it has to be without preconditions. You have to say, you have your conditions in your heart, of course, in your mind, but you have to sit at the table to start discuss, possibly without too much noise, without going on the news and giving press conference every 2 hours, because it destroys every effect, and to have what it used to be in the past. The solution of that, to have a complicated, long, difficult, but confidential also negotiation, and then in the end you have peace.
Right, but Ambassador, why is the US in the first place so strongly, and why is NATO in the first place so strongly supporting Ukraine, which is neither a long-time traditional Western ally, nor is it a NATO member state? I mean, Georgia was attacked back in 2008 by Russia in a very similar scenario, and we didn't see anything close to what we are witnessing today in terms of military and political support.
Well, the issue is, it has been discussed so many times. Your question is a good question, of course, but we know, the answer in a way. Because, of course, Ukraine is not a NATO nation. I think it will never be a NATO nation, this is my personal opinion. And at the beginning of the war, on February 23rd, the day before the war, Chancellor Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, said very clearly on the record, the entry of Ukraine in NATO is not on the agenda and will not be on the agenda. So I don't think, that is going to happen. Having said that, what we think, and in what we call the West, perhaps is not the right way of, of saying this, let's say Europe and the United States and Canada and Western countries, what we called in the past the Euro-Atlantic community, we think that, a principle has been violated, which is the principle of independence and the principle that, you have every country has the right to be respected in its borders. And and we know the Russians don't agree with that, but I think, it has been said many times and written many times that the territorial integrity of Ukraine was stated and was signed also by Russia. Because let's not forget that in 1994, there was this memorandum that we used.
The Budapest Memorandum.
Sorry?
The Budapest Memorandum.
Exactly. And the Ukrainians have been very naive, perhaps, in a way, if you think retrospectively, because they have agreed to give all their nuclear weapons to Russia, and they had nuclear weapons, in exchange to be recognized as an independent country with recognized borders. This has been violated.
And now, Ambassador, so when you talk about the possibility of having peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, so I guess you wouldn't agree with Henry Kissinger's proposal that Ukraine should cede parts of its territory to Russia in exchange for peace and to allow Russia for a face-saving exit?
We are going into very difficult territory because this thing, seen today as we speak, is not solvable because the two sides are saying opposite things, as we said in the beginning a few minutes ago. So what you mean by territorial integrity? For instance, would the line of February 24 acceptable to Ukraine in the end? Perhaps. There are also many solutions that can be found, if you want really to achieve peace. You can also have a referendum, which is, a free one, controlled by the United Nations. It is possible to do that if you have good faith. Crimea, of course, is a special case, because we all know that Crimea is historically Russia, but in 1954 it was given to Ukraine, So on which side you want to go? Again, probably the best thing to do probably is to ask to the people of Crimea where they want to stand. I don't know. It is not something for you and for me to decide that. I think that the people concerned should be. But again, the principle of recognition of historical, internationally recognized borders is essential. And after the Second World War, it has been respected.
Now, Ambassador, let's move on to Turkey. So since the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Turkey has remained the friendliest of all NATO member states with Moscow. It has not imposed any sanctions towards Russia, nor has it canceled any flights between the two countries. And it has continued to cooperate very closely with both Kiev and Moscow. So what do you make of Turkey's balancing act between these two countries? And how important is Turkey still to the transatlantic alliance?
Well, Turkey is very important for the transatlantic alliance. It is very important because of its geographical position. It is important because of its size. It is important because of its history. We know that Turkey is an important country. No doubt about that. Now, in a perfect world, I underline that in a perfect world, the stance of Turkey could be criticized because, as you are saying, yes, it has condemned the aggression, but on the same side, at the same time, it has not put sanctions against Russia. On the other hand, in a more, in a more practical system, where you look at the result in the end and not at the theory, perhaps it can play a useful role. I think that Turkey has played, for instance, a useful role on the issue of export of wheat, through the Black Sea. So if Turkey is, playing a positive role, let's accept it.
Right, but Turkey is still conditioning Finland's and Sweden's accession to NATO. How long can this go on for?
You mean about the enlargement of NATO?
Right.
Well, again, I don't have access to, things which are not public, What I think is that in the end, Turkey will say yes to the enlargement to Sweden and Finland. I think this is what we're talking about.
Right.
Who wish to enter into NATO. There are issues concerning Turkish or exiled people who live in Sweden and in Finland. And I frankly don't know exactly the details. I mean, nobody really knows. I mean, what kind of discussion are being held among the two parties. I don't think that Sweden and Finland, especially Sweden, democratic country, I don't think they will do something unlawful against people who emigrated legally in their country. So something like giving back to Turkey political opponent. I don't think they say that Sweden will do that. There will be some kind of compromise. I don't know which one, but I think in the end, this is my opinion at least, it will be very difficult for Turkey to be isolated and to oppose the enlargement.
Right. One more question regarding Turkey before we move on. Do you think, I mean, we know that relations between Turkey and NATO and Turkey and the US specifically have deteriorated over the past 10 years. Do you think it is possible for US and Turkey to recalibrate, rejuvenate their relationship?
It's a very difficult question, in fact, because Turkey is a NATO ally since the beginning. Is a founding member of NATO practically. I don't remember exactly the moment, but since a long time. It has played during the Cold War a very important role. It is a very important country because it is in a key area bordering with the Middle East, Syria, Iran, etc., and we have an interest in keeping Turkey united in some way or close to us. I think we have an interest in that. I think the Turks also have a basic interest to remain part of the West and to remain part of NATO. Of course, there is some kind of gray territory there. And I don't agree with all. Of course, if you want me to say that, with all the ideas and all the policies of Turkey. The important thing is that, we are a little patient in a certain way because we think that in the end, Turkey will always fall on this side, on the right side.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about European defense spending. I mean, the US has been complaining for many, many years that its European allies are not allocating enough funds for defense. Of course, NATO has been calling for all member states to allocate more than 2% or more than 2% of their BDP, over their GDP for defense spending. We know that when President Donald Trump was in power, he criticized many European countries. He pulled out troops from certain countries. Do you see any positive steps being made by European NATO allies over the past couple of months in terms of defense spending?
Okay. Well, first of all, we have to put it into an historical perspective. After the end of the Cold War, the general idea, probably wrongly so, but it was a common idea, was that, we were entering into a period of indefinite peace. And so the European countries did what it is called to take the dividend of peace, which is to say, in other words, to diminish the expenses for defense in order to support more a social state, expenses for the citizens, more than to spend their money on weapons. And I think this is very understandable. Now, what is happening is that the invasion of Ukraine has changed this paradigm, because all of a sudden, we have to be frank, and very sincere when we speak about that. Not to hide behind, cooked formula. We were taken all by surprise. I also myself, I wrote 2 days before the invasion of Ukraine that I was not thinking that this aggression would take place. And I see, for instance, that even in Russia, Mr. Karaganov, who is the chairman of the Council of Foreign Relations in Russia, he also wrote an article saying that Russia was not interested in attacking Ukraine. So, it has been a surprise for many people. And of course, we have to take our measures. We cannot count anymore on peace. And so all the countries, I think, more or less in Europe are increasing their defense spending. There is this threshold of 2%, which is a little bit theoretical, but certainly there is a tendency in Europe to increase military spending and also to try to coordinate better military, let's say, the defense policy of European countries in what is called, quote unquote, European defense, which is not the right word, but I mean, you understand what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about the Balkans. So strategically, how important is the Balkan Peninsula to the transatlantic alliance? We know that most countries in this region have joined the alliance except for Bosnia, Kosovo, and Serbia. And of course, in the case of Bosnia, there's an ever-present possibility and danger of the Republic of Srpska breaking away, seceding, and declaring its independence. We know that there are very close ties between Milorad Dodik and Vladimir Putin. Do you see this as a possible source of instability for the region, bearing in mind that Bosnia borders 2 NATO member states, Croatia and Montenegro?
Well, thank you for the questions, because the Balkans are very important. Are very important for NATO, are very important for European Union. They're important for Italy, my country. They are a priority area. And I am, in a way, satisfied by the fact that this year, the priority to be given to the Balkans has been underlined and reiterated many times in various occasions by NATO, by the European Union, by the United States. And this is a good thing for the Balkans, because because you come, you know very well where you are speaking from. This issue of the integration of the Balkan region into the Euro-Atlantic community, which means in fact NATO and European Union, has been going on for 20 years. And I understand that there is some fatigue in that, and that many people are unsatisfied because they never see the end of it. Now, I think that for the first time, perhaps, in 20 years, there is a real priority. There is a real priority, and I think that the inclusion, it will take time, but it will take place. It will happen, I'm sure, including where the country where you are speaking from, including Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo. And of course, you are certainly referring to the crisis between Serbia and Kosovo, which is going on now in these days. On this issue, I think that the international community has been too weak, in the sense that most people thought that, that was an issue, yes, after a war like this, you always have some problem, but it will be solved in a way or in another. There will be some compromises between the two sides. And in fact, it didn't happen.
Right,
it didn't happen because...
Right, yeah. But what do you do with countries, with NATO member states, who have not yet recognized Kosovo's independence? And there are at least, I think, 4 or 5 countries which have not yet recognized Kosovo.
Well, this is a well-known fact. This is a well-known fact which has historical reasons, because it was a change of borders, if you like, the only change of borders which happened in the continent of Europe after the Second World War, and 4 or 5 countries, and it is their right to think so. I mean, I have no authority to ask Spain, or I don't remember the other countries, Slovakia perhaps, to recognize Kosovo. But I don't think this is the main issue, frankly speaking, because I think that once you have a stabilized border and a stabilized relation between Serbia and Kosovo, at that point, everybody, slowly perhaps will recognize Kosovo. It will happen, I think. But what is not yet happening, I think, is that Serbia and Kosovo recognize each other's point of view. What I mean by that? I think that Serbia has to recognize that Kosovo is an independent country. History cannot go back. It will be independent, and it will be in the interest of everybody to have a good relationship between Serbia and Kosovo, difficult as it is. On the Kosovo side, I think that it has to be recognized that the Serbian minority, whatever you call Serbian speaking, have to be respected, and they have their own rights. This is a very important point, because unless the two sides recognize each other fully and completely, there will never be a real peace. This is very important.
Right, Ambassador, on the eastern shores of the Balkans is, of course, the Black Sea, which has not been, I mean, NATO has not been really paying much attention to it since the collapse of the USSR. However, since Russia's annexation of Ukraine a couple of years ago, the Black Sea is once again in focus. How important is it strategically to the alliance? And do you see the possibility of NATO increasing its naval presence in the sea by, of course, relying on Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria?
Well, you know, we have not to exaggerate things, I think, you know. The Black Sea is there. It has its own importance. It's not as important as the Mediterranean, but it is important, of course. There are NATO countries on its borders, as you just said, Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania, and, you know, relations with the others. So, you know, I don't think that now we should look at the Black Sea as a place where you put warships, you know, from all sides in order to increase tension. Because the issue today is to diffuse tension, not to create tensions. So I would not, how can I say, I would not put too much emphasis on that. And I think that for the time being, the Black Sea is a place where everybody has to live together and to respect each other. Because as I said before, speaking about Serbia and Kosovo, the basis of international living together is that you have to respect the other, you know. The other is different from you, has different views from you, and you disagree. There's nothing wrong in disagreeing, you know, if it is peaceful, and you have to have respect. So, you know, I think also in this, you know, situation, as you are mentioning here in the Black Sea, I think that every side has to be respecting the emotions and intentions of the others.
Right. And finally, how do you see the future of NATO as an alliance? Do you see it, I mean, in terms of its, you know, interests, in terms of its activities, its enlargement, its goals? Do you see greater cooperation with, for example, Middle Eastern countries? Do you see a greater shift towards Asia, or will it continue to be focused primarily on Europe and on Eastern Europe as a whole?
You know, this is a very difficult question, you know, very difficult, because if you look historically, and we have to take a few minutes to say this, you know, because it's an important issue, and very few people know NATO well, by the way, what I see, you know. NATO was founded in 1949 by 12 countries, including Italy, my country, 12 countries, in order to protect, that was the idea, Western Europe for a possible Soviet invasion. That was the basic purpose of founding of NATO. Then after that, NATO had a lot of success, if you like, in a way, because it won the Cold War without fighting the war, just the contrary of what Mr. Putin is doing, you know. And it has been considered a successful organization by many, and it had eight different enlargements, coming from 12 to 30 countries. And then, you know, there are two other countries waiting. So it is an organization which has success. Now, you can ask me about the future. I don't know, of course, about the future. Just it's difficult to recognize the past, so can you imagine the future? But what I can say is that at the end of the Cold War, there was an issue about the existence of NATO. You know, the purpose is already achieved. You know, why we keep NATO alive? Then there was the dissolution of Yugoslavia. This was a turning point in the history of NATO, because what happened, and you know these things very well from where you speak, there was a very bloody civil war, a lot of destruction, a lot of sad things. I don't want to go back into details. And NATO was able to produce peace. You like it or not in a perfect way, but, you know, it succeeded where nobody else had succeeded in bringing peace to the region. I know that the Dayton agreements are not perfect. Everybody recognizes this, but at least they are there. And even in your country, you don't fight to each other, you know, there is peace. It's not satisfactory for everybody. I don't want to go into details on that, but at least there is peace, you know. So NATO was able to be very helpful in what we call crisis management. which is a different thing from defense, from an aggression. So in the future, I think that already it is an established alliance. I don't think it will be dissolved. I will think it will be a sort of security provider from, let's say, democracies that recognize each other as being a source of stability for the others. I don't think, and I deny, that NATO is an aggressive organization. It's not an aggressive organization. And it works, I want to remind to people who listen to us, it works by consensus. So there is no vote in NATO, no vote. It's not like the European Union, it's not like the United Nations, there is no vote. It works by consensus. It means that you have a number of allies in the same organization, and they decide together what to do. And it is a political decision which is taken with the agreement of everybody. So you cannot decide by consensus to aggress somebody, So the idea that Mr. Putin is saying, that NATO wants to aggress Russia is completely unjustified. It has no sense.
Right, Ambassador, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you once again for your time.
I thank you for your questions, which are complicated questions, but are the right questions. So thank you to you.